Thank you very much. Thank you, Toby, for that very, very kind introduction. Thank you to all of my great friends, to those that have made the Scoville Fellowship and the foundation what it is today. Obviously, we just feel so blessed and honored that this story is anchored in Connecticut, anchored in Northwest Connecticut. And so I was so honored to get the invitation to come by and speak to you just for a few minutes, because I know that you have a lot of connections to make and a lot of private conversations to have. But let me just say a quick word about Toby and how much he means to me. The only part of the story that I'll fill in with a little bit more detail is how we met. I was this long shot candidate running against a 24-year incumbent. Nobody gave me a shot. I knew Toby Moffett. Everybody in Connecticut knows Toby Moffett. They know that he's a giant killer. They know that he took on fights that no one else was willing to take on. And I was doing my first fundraiser down here in Washington. It was a sort of fundraiser designed for young professionals, $5 a head. I showed up on time. Yeah, $5 a head. I showed up on time, and there was no one at this fundraiser. And I was sitting at the bar with my young finance director, and this silver-haired fox comes walking up the stairs. Somebody that I remember as a kid watching on TV. It's Toby Moffett, who had seen somewhere an invitation for this event, came straight up to me, introduced himself to me, sat down next to me at the bar, and never left my side over the course of the next 5 months. And what he did for me that day was just give me inspiration that I could do this, that if Toby Moffett was on my side, that if he cared enough to show up at an event in Hartford, that he was in Washington, that he frankly wasn't even invited to.
My first passing.
Then I could do this. And every one of you has that person in your life, that person who believed in you, who told you that, you could get this fellowship, no matter the fact that it selects so few of those that apply, that you could work in Washington, D.C. And in many ways, that person to me is Toby. And he has inspired me to care about the issue of progressive foreign policy, to care about being an internationalist at a time when a lot of people look at an increasingly chaotic, dangerous world and want to retreat, either as a nation or personally, from that conversation. And so I'm really here just to deliver a simple message to you, which is this. You need to go about the business of making more of my colleagues care about the world, right? We need more champions who are invested in trying to sort out what is an increasingly ugly, multipolar, diffuse global order that makes it hard sometimes for people who think like me to decide to invest portions of their life in that conversation, in part because there are other really pressing issues in which the lines are bright and are clear, right? It's easy, not easy, but it's easier to engage in a lot of these domestic fights because we know who's the good guy and we know who the bad guy is. It's harder to sit down and try to figure out what the path is on American intervention in Syria because we're dealing with a lot of bad guys and good guys who do business with bad guys. That's my mission now as a United States Senator, is to try to build a bench of those that care about foreign policy, who are willing to build, as I call it, a proactive, progressive foreign policy agenda, and then go out and sell it to the American public. And I was reminded of how important this initiative is just about 2 months ago. You probably remember the announcement that the World Food Program made, that they had run out of funding to continue to supply nutritional benefits to Syrian refugees that are spread out all around the region. And they were begging the United States and other partners to step up to the plate, or they were going to essentially have to spend food benefits for these individuals and families and children who had fled the death and destruction and violence of the Syrian civil war. And, well, eventually the United States did step up. Our first response was that, well, we're the biggest donor, and we've already done a lot, and so you really have to go out and talk to somebody else to get your money. And I thought about this double standard that we have in this country, whereby when we set out to undertake a military campaign, when we decide upon a military objective, we don't just allocate our share, right? We decide to allocate every dime that is necessary, and then we go and hope that other people will pitch in. But when it comes to humanitarian programs, we're going to put in just as much as we can afford. And then if there's a gap, then that's somebody else's problem. Not understanding that when, in this instance, that young man who can't get a square meal from the World Food Program has very few places to turn to. One of them at the top of his list is going to be the very terrorist organizations that we're fighting in those regions, who know that if they offer that young man a job and a salary and a square meal, that he'll come and fight for them. Even if in his heart he really doesn't believe in it, he needs that sustenance. And so the fact that we weren't willing to fund that program with a couple extra $1 million, frankly, the amount of money that it takes to fire a handful of Tomahawks into Syria and Iraq on a daily basis, speaks to the gap that we have right now between what we know works and what we're willing to get behind. And so to me, this new proactive foreign policy agenda that myself and a handful of other senators are working on developing is about the recognition that in an increasingly confusing world, we need a totally new set of tools with which to try to support friends and win new friends, that we need a new Marshall Plan for places like the Middle East and Eastern Europe and the Baltics and the Balkans, that today we have a military budget that is the same size as the next 20 countries after us, and yet we should be endeavoring to have a foreign aid and humanitarian budget that maybe doesn't equal the next 20 countries, but maybe at least equals the next 5. This is the task that we have ahead of us, and you can see how hard it's going to be. You can see how difficult that is when so many of my colleagues still view U.S. intervention simply through the lens of brute military force, when 47 Republicans are so quick to sign on to a letter to the Ayatollah of Iran that leaves us no path but a military campaign in a country that's 3 times the size of Iraq. Why? Because there are still too many people who only think that we can influence events around the world by bombing and by invading, when we are right now on the precipice of negotiating an agreement which could change that region and change a country's weapons projection without any blood shed. So we have an enormous amount of work to do, but what this fellowship program is really all about is about bringing young people here who have that same vision. And so I get to do this job, the best job that you can have in the world, because of great friends like Toby and others. Diane Randall's here from the Friends Committee, who believed in me early on. But now you have a job to do, which is to make sure that there is a bench of foreign policy thinkers here who have learned from the mistakes of the last 10 years, who are willing to argue for new resources, conflict resolution programs, food assistance, foreign aid, that is really going to make the difference at a time when we need that help more than ever. So thrilled to be asked to come by and say a few words. Happy to answer a few questions that you have on current events, and just really proud to be associated with the people in this room. So thank you very much for having me.